recording for the video.
Yeah. Okay. 1 second. I also see 2 more people logging on, so let's just give them a second. Then we will begin. Okay.
Well, I'm ready to cue it up when you tell me.
Okay, so I know that you mentioned that there might be a problem. We will, if the recording is conflicting with the video, then we'll stop the recording, but hopefully we will work so that way everybody can share in. Alan, thank you for joining us. Hope you got good stuff at the grocery store.
It's the masked man.
Yeah. All right, Maria, you have the floor.
Great. So everybody, I thought it would be fun to start with, we have several videos to share. Sherill and I have curated, we spent some time last night looking through some of the archival clips that we have, and we thought it would be fun to share some maybe you've seen before, but many you have not. And just to get started with the fact that when we talk about Sherill and his career, we talk about it in terms of what the masses know. So one of the things I always say when I say my husband was a baritone from the Metropolitan Opera and around the world, you know, he sang with all 3 tenors. When I say that, it clicks. So we thought we would start with a duet. This is the Bohème duet. We believe it's a Tucker Foundation gala. And if you are familiar with the Tucker family in Savannah and with the book that David just wrote, which was fantastic. So this is, I think, the Tucker Gala. If we're wrong, it's a Pavarotti Plus, but this was televised with Luciano Pavarotti and Sherill for the Bohème duet by Puccini.
E in un coupé, Bombariglia livré, li salutò ridendo. Do, musetta le dissi, e il cuore non batte, o non lo sento. Grazie al velluto che il copre, gusto d'aver, c'è gusto d'aver. Loyola va, ti rodi e ridi, e non batte, no. Ebbene. Io pur vidi, Musetta, Mimi, l'hai vista, oh, guarda, era in carrozza vestita come una regina. E viva ne son contento, un giorno si strugge d'amor, lavoriamo, lavoriamo. Che penna infame! Che infame pennello!
always use, never shows me.
Good.
So
What is-
Cheryl, do you want to just kind of take?
Well,
the
I would
floor
say,
now?
I would say that it was conducted by Eduardo Muti. He's unfortunately gone, as is Luciano. And did I have a head of hair like that back then? I guess I did. We saw it.
Well, I think what we want to do is kind of open up a few questions. What we've been doing, just a quick update about the festival, and all of you friends, some of you are in on it, but we have been trying to figure out ways to keep this going, much like this Zoom call is about ways to keep the wonderful program of Food for Thought going at the JEA. And so we've been posting Moments with the Maestro on YouTube. So if you haven't had a chance to go on YouTube with the Savannah Voice Festival page, subscribe to it, because it'll tell you when a new video is being posted. But we were doing it every day, and now we've slowed down to maybe 3 times a week, where we've asked people on FaceTime or Facebook to give us questions that they wanted Cheryl to answer. And then Cheryl has made little video sound bites of answering the question. So this is sort of an expansion of that program. So we want you to ask questions. We want you to make comments about how you feel about the performances. And I guarantee you that if you ask one question, it will trigger about 5 stories from Cheryl. So that
Let me throw in something. I've been watching
already
the television politics, so I have learned never to answer the question that's asked. Always have some other question that has nothing to do with what was asked, which I'm learning from all the politicians.
I'm sure he'll answer your question if you ask it. So actually, I would like Cheryl, just so they understand your relationship. I had talked about the fact that sometimes I qualify people who are not part of the operatic world about who you are and what you do as the relationship to the people that were a little better known in the zeitgeist. So obviously people had heard of the 3 tenors, they've heard of Andrea Bocelli. It seems the tenor voice is known as kind of the most popular out in pop culture, and that's okay. It is what it is, but your career was as big in our industry as those 3 guys. So you had such a special relationship with each and every one of them. And of course, Placido and you did a lot of recording together, but Luciano, there were many great memories. And you want to talk a little bit about your relationship with Luciano? You had nicknames for each other, and
well, yeah, Luch and Plach. Cirillo, they called me Cirillo, which is really not Cheryl in Italian, because there is no name Cheryl in Italian. So Cirillo, which I think is Cirrus or something like that, they all called me that. I was lucky because if you're going to do a duet with another male, it's a baritone, and I was the baritone of choice, shall we say. So I sang with Jose and Placido and Luciano and many other tenors, lesser known, partly because the 3 tenors became worldwide famous. And there was no baritone in those concerts, but whenever those guys, those 3 or many others, wanted to do a duet, I was the baritone of choice. So in that way, I was very lucky.
And will you tell us a little bit of the fact that we have, of the 3, we've lost Luciano. He's not part of our realm, and there's such great legacy of all of the great work that he's done. A lot of things that maybe they don't know about his work with UNICEF and in different nations, and trying to bring opera to the masses. Will you tell us a little bit about a project that you did in honor of Luciano in Jordan? That was
his widow now, what's her first name? I don't remember.
Nicoletta.
Nicoletta called me and wanted to know if I would be part of a concert honoring Luciano in the country of Jordan. And I had to say at that point, it was only about what, 6 years ago, I guess, 6 years ago. I said, I can't do any of the bomber arias, but there are things that I can sing. And I was proud and very complimented to be part of it. So both of us flew New York, Amman, and then they sent a car in a limo and down to, I don't even know what town it was. It wasn't really a town, but a beautiful hotel where they put us up. And we sang this concert out in the desert. They put a rug over the sand and had, I don't know, what was it, 300-400 chairs for audience. And it was really like a rock concert, a huge stage with big screens on each side, like 30-40 feet, not inches, feet size, each side, like a rock concert. And Sting, for instance, was part of it, and other Italians whose names probably are not so well known here. Andrea Bocelli was part of it. In fact, we did what the Bohème Quartet, third act, Bohème Quartet, and then Sting sang La Ci darem la mano with Angela Gheorghiu, a Romanian soprano, beautiful soprano. Was very interesting. In fact, when I went to rehearsal with him, he looked over and said, well, I really shouldn't be singing this piece in front of you, because I did Giovanni, from which La Ci darem comes, the Mozart opera, many, many, many times. And I doubt that Sting ever sang Giovanni, but then that's perfectly fine. A very, very famous guy. And we were there, 5 or 6 days, something like that. And it was a
guest of the King and Queen of Jordan, and it was a pledge that Luciano had made to them for UNICEF. And so Nicoletta made good on the pledge, and it became a memorial to Luciano rather than that he himself got to come. So it was a very special event, and I mean there was a lot of Italian pop famous pop stars there. So that was interesting.
Well, I'd never been, we'd never been in Jordan. And in fact, I sang the Copeland arrangement of Shall We Gather by the River? And they're talking about the River Jordan, which in this case was just over the horizon. It was very close. Ordinarily, when I sang Shall We Gather by the River in America, you're talking, thousands of miles away. And here it was like a mile away, the River Jordan. It was a great thrill to do that.
Sherill, one of the things I remember the most that sort of sits here as a weird thing is as beautiful as it was with all of the Persian carpets, and they had big outside fests for us with pits of smoked meat. And I mean, it really felt like something out of Lawrence of Arabia. But always in the distance were people with huge machine guns just protecting the whole situation. And so here we were in the middle of the desert with these beautiful carpets and silk billowing in the wind and this big stage. And then up on the mountaintops were silhouettes of these guys with, ammunition. It was very surreal to have the two things going on at the same time. A
little strange that way, but musically beautiful. And in fact, there is a video of this whole concert that's available. One can buy that. So we're going to play something else?
Yeah, so what I thought we would segue into right now is a little bit, however you have connected to Sherill as an artist, whether it's watching his master classes in our events that we have going on, or listening to a recording of his, or seeing a Met video, I thought just to set it up with the Sherill Milnes that the singers know, the mentor that gives information, is really based on this next clip. Not that it's a very famous clip. It is really from the Met production of Il Trovatore by Verdi. The reason why we picked this aria, Il Balen, is because what it does for us is share the Milnes formula. Sherill had stage presence. His musicality was extraordinary. And the way that he made every phrase was almost instrumental in nature. And there are some signature Milnes things that Chad is smiling and nodding his head about that the singers know, like the Milnes arm, you know, the gesture. They parody him sometimes at the end of a performance in jest and, you know, say maestro. And so we wanted to share something. Notice what I'm talking about. So this is Sherill by himself on the Met stage. It's a giant set for Trovatore. It's all stairs. In fact, Fabrizio Milano, who's been part of our team, directed this. And it's just a moment with Sherill in this aria, very Verdi-esque, very legato, and taking you from the beginning of the aria to the end of that moment. Doesn't include the cabaletta, just the first part of the aria. You will see quintessential Sherill. So let me
Here we go.
up. Hold on, it's not a here we go because I got to cue it. Okay, so now here we go.
It went dark. Probably gonna go.
So I let the applause go on a little bit for that, just
That
to,
was for my sake.
Well, I wanted to ask Sherill a question about that because, as you could see, it was a very quintessential Milnes moment where, you know, he began the last note, carried it all the way through, held physically what that felt like. The camera, you know, accommodated it, and then he just froze as the applause rolled in. And if you've seen Sherill talk about in his master classes this with singers about how to end a piece, how important it is to end it as you begin it. He really did practice what he preaches. But my question to Sherill that I wanted to ask is if you know, here you are on this huge stage all by yourself, it all has to do with this. Any phlegm gets in the way, any breathing, any issues, it busts the whole live moment. And you really had no moments in your career that ever busted. So how did it feel in that moment? If you can you recall those rolling applauses and holding the character while the applause rolled in? Can you talk about that?
Sure. Well, I was taught never to break character, and 99% of the time I didn't. So you end up in a posture, you have to freeze it, even if it's physically, you know, your muscles are aching or so forth, it doesn't matter. Also, something else I wanted to point out, we didn't discuss this before. Long phrases, and there's lots of long phrases in Puccini and Verdi and Mozart for that matter. Often you have a lung full of air, but it's carbon dioxide, and your body is screaming for oxygen, but your instrumental mind says you got to hold it longer. You actually can hold it longer because you have the air, but your body is screaming for oxygen. You have a lung full of carbon dioxide, if you understand how I'm saying this. And there's a certain amount of discomfort. I don't know if I would say pain, but discomfort, because you know you can keep holding the note physically, but you have to fight against the body demand for more oxygen because you can't breathe out and breathe in while you're holding a note, of course. And one reaction at the end of that aria was gratitude. I was grateful because that's I found that a very hard aria, very exposed. And I was always grateful when it was over. The rest of the role is not easy, but what I've sung before and a lot of it afterwards, it's doable. That's the hardest. Often the aria is the hardest piece in an opera. And that's, of course, to a large degree, what the audience is waiting to hear, and just how good, from their point of view, how good are you? And by that applause, that was pretty good. Maybe one of the best times that I've sung that. Wasn't always that good, but I'm grateful.
Well, apropos of that, do you want to tell the story of your debut when you talk about taking in, you know, a full set of
Oh my, well,
lungs and breathing? Tell the story of your debut of Faust.
my debut was at the old Met. Younger singers, younger folks think of Lincoln Center as the Met. I'm old enough to call it the no longer new Met. I debuted in the old Met in December of '65 in Faust, the opera Faust by Gounod. Well, Valentin is a great baritone role, and he has Avant de quitter, c'est a very famous aria. However, he does not control the opera. It's a soprano tenor bass opera. Clearly, the baritone has this beautiful piece. And it was conducted by Georges Pret, French conductor. I think we've now lost him as well. Well, Chad would know what I'm talking about. There's a bar of E flats. It's printed generally with that bar in the music. And at City Opera the year before my debut there, same role, I sang it with the bar. And let's say hundreds of times, I sang it with the bar intro. Well, it became clear, Mr. Pret, a French conductor, and it became clear that the original version didn't have the bar intro. You came in right on the downbeat. And while, of course, I understood what he meant, you know, when you do, I did maybe the 6th, the 7th, the 8th performance, not the first. So I never had an orchestra rehearsal, never had a stage rehearsal. I had rehearsals, but in C level with some of the set. So
for your debut, you never got a full rehearsal.
never.
After you met for your debut.
Oh,
role.
never. I walked on stage and saw, what I was doing. And that, of course, I was able to do that to a large degree because of 300 or more performances with the Goldovsky Company. We haven't really talked about him in this segment, but I do talk about him in a video from Meet the Maestro, whatever it is. At any rate, about a bar before the intro bar, or let's say, no, a beat before. And then right then, my mind, my habit was with the bar. I had another 4 beats of music. All of a sudden, at that moment, I realized, oh my gosh, he doesn't want the bar. He's going to bring the orchestra in on the downbeat. And I didn't have time. It was a half a second or something. I didn't have time to take a breath. I just threw whatever air I had in my lungs just for living. I threw that air at my vocal folds and crossed my fingers. Well, I thought it was a disaster. It took all of my performance guts, and I say that word, guts, nerve, to keep singing, because I thought, I had failed. It even occurred to me to put my hands up and say, I'm sorry, folks, I can't do this, and walk off stage. Well, I didn't. And as we know, when a singer, and again, Chad, because he's the one singer I know that's watching this, you make a mistake on stage and you think, oh, horrible. It's horrible. Everybody's going to know. Well, the fact is, nobody knew, even my colleagues on stage. And afterwards I asked, did you hear anything at the beginning? Was it a little weird? Everybody said, no, what are you talking about? Well, they don't get it. And so I was lucky that I didn't throw up my hands and say, I'm sorry, folks, I can't do it, because they didn't know that I thought I couldn't do it. But I almost didn't sing at my debut.
So Sherill, we talked about your opera life and being on stage, and it wasn't just the Met, it was Vienna Staatsoper and Covent Garden and all these other wonderful, amazing houses like La Scala. But you had such a vast and incredible recital career. I'm not sure that people really know how much you did on the recital stages.
I did probably 500 recitals, singer and pianist.
And of course, the other thing about it is that, you did it with one pianist basically the whole time, except for a couple of years out. It was John Spong. Who was your amazing collaborator through everything, even promo events. And the art of the recital, which is a lot of the formatting that we do. I mean, Savannah Opera does performances, but we really started the festival in a recital format. The art of the recital has its own muscle and its own process. So what I'd like to play, if it's okay to do it now, one of the things that we chose, which we don't think we've ever shown to anybody, unless you happen to be in on that interview in a New York TV station, which I'd be thrilled to know that you were.
A long time ago.
This is an interview that Sherill was doing on New York television. And I don't remember the name of the interviewer. Do you remember?
I picture her, but I don't remember her name.
Well, we're going to see her for a minute because she's actually talking to you, and then you jump out of the scene, and live on TV with John Spahn waiting at a piano, as he always is for you, you're going to sing Shenandoah. So I'm going to play that clip for you.
Good.
Before you leave us today, you have graciously agreed to sing, and it's wonderful. Sometimes I think we get so caught up in your Verdi roles and so much else what you do in the world of opera, we forget how much you love American songs and that patriotism that is so much a part of you.
Well, it's true. Being from mid-America, I love the folk music from mid-America, and this beautiful arrangement by Celius Dougherty is an old American folk song called Shenandoah, the tune of which I know we're all familiar. Oh, Shenandoah, I hear you calling. Hi-oh, you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Hi-oh, I'm bound away. Across the wide Missouri, she's a mighty river. Hi-oh, you rolling river. When she rolls down, her tops will shiver. I-oh, I'm bound away across the wide Missouri. Farewell, my dearest, I'm bound to leave you. Oh, you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I'll not deceive you. I'm bound away across the wide Missouri. Farewell, my dearest, I'm bound to leave you. Hi-oh, you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I'll not deceive you. I'm bound away across the wide
Before you
So there we go. Yay.
Questions?
Anybody have, hey, can I do a shout out? I think Santiago joined us. Santiago Ballerini joined us. So we have two singers on now. Hi, Santimu. Hi. So I want to say one thing about Sherill doing recitals. When I see Sherill in that kind of format now on video, I superimpose our artists' faces on his. So I see Santi, I see Chad, I see Peter, I see Carl, Jim. Like, it's so he was young and you know in his prime of that stuff, and so all of the things that he does, the fact that he gives that to the artists that we work with, I see the legacy going backwards, and that's pretty exciting. I'm so glad we got to do this so that we could revisit that.
Questions? No?
Sherill, you want to tell a story about John Spong?
Well, there's nothing so funny, and I did a whole segment on him a different time. He was not a piano major in college. He was a voice major. And whether that, he always had the fingers and could play anything that was out there. Whether his singing added to his knowledge and his feeling for vocal line. So he played the piano with vocal line. And I always considered it was a great privilege to have John, my accompanist. Well, I had a 42-year career. And I think you mentioned it earlier. I think it was just 1 year that he couldn't play. Some college didn't want him to go away. Mostly they did want him to go away and come back. And so that's 41 years of recital music. Now we're talking in recitals. You're talking early Italian, you're talking Mozart or pre-Mozart, you're talking Lieder, you're talking French art songs, could be zarzuela, although I not coming from a Latino background, I really didn't do zarzuelas. I knew the word. And then American songs. One point I would like to make in doing talk shows, and a few of us, Beverly did it, and Marilyn, a bunch of easier interview people did talk shows. When a Broadway performer or a nightclub performer would perform on a talk show, they could use 90, if not 100% of the repertoire on that show. We opera singers, it's a problem because 95% of what we sing doesn't really work on television. We have to look, well, Shenandoah I did as an encore, how many times? And the Switch encore, which we're not playing today, I guess. John is a singer, going back to John for a moment. John is a singer. I would announce this Benjamin Britten folk song, Oliver Cromwell, and then John would walk around the piano and I would walk around to the piano bench. He would take off his glasses and hand them to me, and he would sing the piece and I would play it. Well, interestingly enough, we did a huge, well, more than one, but one big European recital tour. And we were advised by various Europeans who lived in New York, don't do it. Europeans are more serious about their music. And I took that advice to heart. And I thought, well, maybe they're right. Maybe I shouldn't do something that's a little bit shticky, even though he can sing it and I can play it. Still, maybe they're right. And fortunately, last minute, I thought that people are people, and they're going to hear an hour and a half of Brahms and Strauss and Schubert and Mozart and whoever. They're ready for something with a little smile. Well, it turned out in Vienna and Berlin and Paris and all over the place, people loved it. It took a few moments. It took about 8 or 16 bars of music for them to kind of get it was a joke, but they loved the fact that we did it. Obviously, you have to be able to perform it. You can't be terrible and make a shtick thing like that work. Well, we weren't terrible, and I simplified the piano part so I could play it. John didn't have to simplify it because he was a very good tenor, and we did it all over Europe. And I'm glad that I decided people were people.
Very good. So I just got a question from someone, and Toby has a question. So Toby?
Well, just you led into my question, actually, because you talked about your ability to play piano, and you played many other instruments also. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I have music education degrees, Bachelor of a BME and an MME, and that assumes, music education. It assumes you're going to teach. And I had planned to teach. I just took out 42 years to sing around the world. And that's what I'm doing now in Savannah and all over the world still. Part of a music education degree is study instruments. And I was a violin player. I started in 5th grade on violin. And from violin to viola is not hard. I also learned to play string bass, dance band string bass. I say pre-rock and roll, or we called it the businessman's bounce, just all, Blue Moon and all these ballad type pieces I could play on the bass. And then I studied a year of clarinet, private clarinet. So I played clarinet and flute. Well, if you play clarinet, you play sax, which is not an orchestral instrument, but I taught, in fact, postmasters in Downers Grove, my hometown near Chicago. I taught on some level, usually grade school, usually not more than junior high, every instrument except cello and harp. Cello and harp, I don't know anything about. I never studied those, but all the rest, I had a decent working knowledge and could play around. And, when you teach youngsters, it's more about teaching music The mechanics of the instrument, that's part of it, of course. But it's more about teaching music and the love of music and inspiration from music than just the mechanics. And Maria had made the point, not on this film, but some other point. I was a charter member of the Chicago Symphony Chorus way back when it started. There was Reiner and some of the greatest players of the world. And I heard them play things, and I listened to the way they shaped phrases and thought, I'm going to do that. Well, how much of an influence did that have? You know, I wasn't studying with them, I wasn't paying them, but I was learning from them. And somehow I've always been a good sponge in that way. That is, I would hear something say, oh, that's good, I'm doing it. And then I would try to make that happen. The same when I was at the Met, and I would sit, certainly the first few years, with, well, I never sang with Mario Delmonico, but Bergonzi and Gedda and Tucker and Corelli, those four others as well. But they would do something great. And I remember thinking, ooh, that's nice. I'm going to put that somewhere in my music. I wasn't singing the same music, but whatever they did, however, especially Richard Tucker, however they would caress a phrase, I would find a place where I could caress a phrase in the same way. I was a good sponge in that regard.
So Sherill, let's, what I'd like to do is, I've got one question I'd love for you to answer, but I know it's going to take you a minute to think about it. So I'm going to ask you the question from somebody, and then I'm going to play something while you're thinking about it, then you can answer it. So going on from your recital work, you know, Sherill knew a lot of people in the theater industry. So there were a lot of wonderful colleagues and friends that I personally got to meet because of Sherill, like Rue McClanahan. She actually hosted one of our New York events one time. I said I'd never thought I could introduce a Golden Girl in my life, but she came up and introduced herself and introduced the show. She was fabulous. But so many people were very good friends of ours. Werner Klemperer, who was Otto Klemperer's son, but who was also known as Colonel Klink in Hogan's Heroes. And one of the biggest friendships that you had, the longest friendships, and even his widow is still a very, very good friend of
and supports us.
Yeah, and that's Tony Randall. You may see in Voice Experience, if you look at lists of supporters, the Tony Randall Foundation has been supporting Voice Experience since Tony's passing, because Heather is really in support of what we're doing. So I thought I'd play this. This is Tony Randall and Sherill in an episode of Love, Sydney.
Well, what's the question?
You may have seen this. The question is, what is one of your most meaningful performances that you've had? And Carol actually asked a question too. Now the questions are coming. So let's think about this question. What's one of the most meaningful performances that you've had? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to play just the end of something from Love, Sydney. That is a sitcom that Sherill was guest with Tony and Swoosie Kurtz. And let's see, I hope this is the right video. If it's not, I will stop right away.
Sang love's old sweet song on moonlight day.
You have a very nice voice, Sidney.
Oh, thank you. That's very flattering coming from a real opera singer like you, which I knew all along. The joke's on you.
You just need to let your voice full out from here.
I did.
Oh.
You know, like your idol, Snooky Lanson.
Oh, I was kidding. I knew.
You know, Cecilia.
Yeah, but I'm not going to sing it in front of you.
Go on, Sidney. Sing. It's my birthday.
We could do a duet.
Me sing with Sherill Milnes, the Metropolitan Opera's greatest tenor?
Baritone. Fooled you again. When I tap you, you come in full voice. John, if you please. Does your mother know you're out? Cecilia. Does she know that I'm about to steal ya. Oh, my, when I look in your eyes, something tells me you and I should get together. How about a little kiss, Cecilia? Just a kiss you'll never miss, Cecilia. Why do we two keep on wasting time? Big finish! Oh, Cecilia, you say that you'll be
So that was a real bromance, you and Tony.
Yeah, we did. Well, we did that duet a lot of places, just as a fun thing.
Yeah.
And,
So do you have an answer to your question?
Oh, yeah. Well, I always answer questions with questions. Depends, most meaningful, depends if you're talking internally or externally. My answer right now will be externally. And I suppose then it was at the Vienna State Opera, the Staatsoper, the end of, what was it, 92, 93, something like that. End of that season, last performance of that season. Placido was Otello, Verdi, Shakespeare, Otello. Placido was the Otello, and I think Katia Ricciarelli was the Desdemona. And the rest of the cast, some of the best of the Vienna State Opera. It was a hot performance. It was the last one of the season, but we had, if you think about applause and curtain calls, it was 100, about 102, I've kind of forgotten, it might be 105, 102 curtain calls, like an hour and 45 minutes. Well, you figure, one solo bow is what, 10 seconds, 15 seconds? And I'm talking an hour and a half of applause. Your smile muscles, when you are at a wedding, your smile muscles get tired, they kind of ache. My smile muscles got tired, they ached. So you had to stop smiling for, a few seconds and then smile some more. That, well, applause that goes on that long, you can't discard. You love it, of course.
So, so we have another question. That's a loaded question, I think, because the question is, what do you credit to your energy and vitality?
Heredity.
You were supposed to say me.
Luck. Well, you weren't around for the majority of that 42 years.
Right.
I thought it was necessary. And I guess, I have to say I guess, because I don't know an exact answer to that question. I thought it had to be. And so whatever it cost me internally, physically, I did. Because I felt I had to. Is that an answer?
It is, but you still. This was Adam's question, and he said that he threw you a curveball. He said a softball, but so Carol Greenberg asked. She said do you get pushback from your loyal audience when you do any modern pieces? And it's a good question. And conversely, do you find it difficult to reach modern audiences relying on old, opera standards? I was just having this conversation actually with Andrew Bazance, one of our conductors. He's running Eugene Opera right now, and we're all scrambling to find out what the new normal is in terms of presenting music. And Andrew was just talking about how, doing a Madame Butterfly as opposed to a new work, there's arguments within our industry about that because of this question. We want to reach new audiences, and we want to take it out of the old standard of what we just saw in your video of Il Baleine, but we also want to pay homage and to keep presenting the standards for the audience. So what's your take on like a Michael Ching piece that we would commission as opposed to doing Pagliacci this summer like we did, which is one of the most famous operas?
Well, for me, first of all, we're talking about modern opera. Are we talking about older operas done in a modern set? Which is one way. I don't know that I'm such a
yeah,
fan
I
of
think
that.
more the repertoire.
Are we talking about very modern operas? And I didn't do that many of them. I was not a fan, and still am not a fan of, I'll use a phrase here, of very dissonant music. I'm not, and I don't think most audiences are. One has to also keep in mind opera traditions 100 and 150 years ago, very different than now. I was lucky in my time span of career. Film makes a huge difference because you have close-ups. In fact, I have Met series, there's 5 or 6 operas in which I'm the baritone. And why I did this, I don't know. I just knew that I had to. When you sign the contract to film something, and they filmed a performance at the Met, they filmed what the audience at the Met saw. It's one way to do it. At any rate, I would say, yes, I'm happy to do this, and I signed whatever the deal was, but I said, you have to, before you do the actual taping, you have to show me the scratch tape, because they would do a camera rehearsal take, and then the next performance they would broadcast. I said, I have to see the scratch tape, because the biggest problem is the old-fashioned opera. You could see that people weren't really listening and paying attention to what other people were saying and having a human reaction. Well, you see yourself on camera not paying attention, you see it once, you fix it because you look stupid. Well, does anybody want to look stupid on a tape? Well, no, of course not. So you pay attention. I did that for everyone in 6, 8, maybe 10 different operas. You fix it. You find out, you go back maybe, and you retranslate what your colleague's saying or what's being said over in the corner, whatever. You retranslate that. Oh, yes, they're saying this. Then my human reaction to whatever that is, and I have choices about the reaction, but you have to have a reaction. That's a big difference. In the old days, they didn't pay any attention.
So Sherill, I just to go back to the question though, do you feel that the videoing that's going on right now is one way for us to keep the validity of the old works? Do you think that the Met HD and I mean, how do you feel about video in terms of that question, where a modern work might read better on video or an old work might be more interesting done with the new video footage?
Well, it's a two-edged sword. Camera takes you into a face, and if the person is expressive, you get more of that expression watching their face. However, the camera determines what you see. The human eye can see the whole stage and still a person. It's a two-edged sword. It's both better and worse. Are we going to play this last thing?
Yes, we are. I am just queuing it up right now. Hold on, so I don't play something up.
Because I have my little stories about that afterwards.
Okay. So so now what we thought we would share is in line with the Tony Randall video. Sherill did a lot and does a lot with the Kennedy Center Honors. He's a voter and has performed at the Kennedy Center Honors on TV and off for many of the honorees. And in one particular year, Beverly Sills was the honoree. And as you know, Sills and Burnett at the Met was a very famous telecast that brought the two worlds together. And so Carol Burnett was the duet with Sherill to honor Beverly during the Kennedy Center. So we have this. I apologize. It's kind of, the video is kind of old. It doesn't look so clear, but it's obvious.
Generation.
Yeah, it's obvious and it's a lot of fun and it's worth playing. So this is Milnes and Burnett at the Kennedy Center honoring Beverly Sills.
Carol and Sherill.
We're Carol and Sherill, your musical team, saluting the lady we hold in esteem. Carol will carol,
and Sherill will share all our love and affection for the lady up there.
From Beverly, Mass to Beverly Hills, the country's in love with Miss Beverly Sills. So we're gonna do just the obvious thing, dear Beverly, of thee we sing.
Curtain up like the lights. You got nothing to hit but the heights. Starting here, starting now, honey. Everything's coming up, bubble.
Hang on a second. Wait. That was beautiful, but this is supposed to be an opera tribute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can she run an opera company?
Yes, she can.
Can she raise the money 1, 2, 3?
Yes, she can.
Can she keep it all in harmony?
When temperamental singers strike up a minor key, yes, she can.
Don't ever get into the ring with her. Rather refuse, you're sure to lose. Don't let that gracious look blow you away, or that bright head of hair. The fight is over when she begins. The lady always wins.
Bubbles, bubbled, even at 3. What a cutie, dancing, singing, winning. What's more, Bubbles blossomed out musically. What a beauty, watching, listening, learning the score. Who's with Major Bowes there? Who's starring in the shows?
Beverly, come here.
Beverly, come here.
Beverly here, Beverly there, Beverly there, Beverly where?
Beverly up, Beverly low, Beverly stay, Beverly go.
No one is sensible or indispensable, busiest lady all over town, all over town, all over town, all over town, all over town.
Beverly, Beverly, what a great sight to see the little girl Brooklyn in the driver's seat. Beverly, Beverly did it all cleverly, and now she's got the world of music gathering at her feet. Congratulations, everyone's giving ovations. Hope you aren't losing your patience. Give us a second to just one thing more, and then we're through. Hit it! Ooh, sigh, give her your attention. Do I really have to mention she's the
You want me to just go ahead with this?
Well, I want to ask Orly because we had a 1 to 2 time frame. So I want to acknowledge that we've gone a little over. And
Okay, you can talk for a couple more minutes for sure.
Okay, because I think he does have a story to tell about that particular
A quick story,
moment.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you could hear that in there were all kinds of operatic themes with different words. And so the words were complicated and some very fast. And I worked very hard to displace the original and to learn these American words. And Carol Burnett, who carried a much bigger stick, much more famous than I was, came late to the rehearsals. She walked in and she said, I want cue cards, I want big letters, and I want them now. And I said, thank you. I don't think you ever saw us looking, but we were pretty good. You know, I sort of knew it, but having the insurance words there was very meaningful, and I certainly thanked her heartily.
My favorite moment of that clip, and I've seen it a lot, is when you whistle in the Largo portion.
She didn't
and
know
it
it.
completely blows her away. She
Yeah.
is just like, what? You know, it takes her a minute to recover. It's a very charming, very real moment in that concert. And the gentleman that put that together, that's a very hard rendition of all these different genres of music, and then the words being changed. What was the name of the gentleman that did that? Because that was brilliant writing.
Yeah, you know, I can't remember. We're talking a long time ago now.
He did all of that stuff. He was very active in
I had dark hair.
Well, through all these clips, Sherill, I will say your hair was fabulous. And you didn't have to have, unlike your other colleagues, things we don't think about when we're enjoying artists on stage is that you have to be wigged, even for women. You know, the few things that I did on stage, even playing a character like Nanetta, you'd think I could use my own hair, but stage has to be accentuated. So even for women, we wear wigs. So we'll have big, gorgeous wigs that's much more hair than we have naturally. But Sherill never had to be wigged in his career.
Well, not never, but mostly not.
Mostly. For
Backcombing.
Scalia, yes.
Spray.
Yeah.
Lots of spray.
So that was always kind of an interesting thing that, you know, in fact, you had trouble because if they wanted to wig you, your hairline was so low that they had trouble.
It was problematic, yeah.
Oh, the problem.
Gum in the hairline.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, I'm really so happy to have shared this. I mean, we have probably 2 more hours of footage that no one's seen. So if you ever want us to do it again, we would absolutely love to do it. And I hope that the video clips were satisfying to watch and brought back some nostalgia. They did for us. And I want to say the JEA is such a precious place for us. And we miss everyone so much. It's so hard, but I'm very grateful that you all are being safe and that you're doing what you need to do so that we can be together next year when hopefully we will have found some solutions to this terrible, terrible thing. So to see you all and to know that you took the time that it took to figure out the technology to be here means a lot to all of us, to our singers, to Chad and to Santi and Sherill and me. We couldn't do it without you. We need to have this connection. So if this is what we have right now to connect,
That's
we're
it.
very, what a mitzvah, as they say.
What a
So
mitzvah.
thank you, Orly. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, JEA. Yes, round of applause for Sherill, such a wonderful storyteller. We are so grateful. So until the next time.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you, Sherill. We are indebted and so thankful for you sharing all your stories and your talent with us.
Great pleasure.
So just so that everybody who's on knows, July 23rd, we are going to have a second performance or talk with the Savannah Voice Festival. So put that in your calendars, same time, same place. And hopefully you will stay safe and sane until then. Take care of yourselves, everybody. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Sei gesund.
Go on YouTube. Check us out on YouTube so you can see some fun moments if you're missing us.